Hello.
Welcome to United Church Online. We're so glad that you've joined us today.
If you are new to United Church, we would love to be in contact with you. So why don't you fill in a connect card on the link in the description or visit our church website for more information.
Get your Bibles, your notebooks, and pens ready, and let's get ready to receive the word.
So what we're going to do is this morning, I'm just going to unpack some of the thoughts around this vision of what it means to reach. And over the next month, we're going to be putting handles onto it. So today, you're just kind of getting the big picture. And over the next 3 weeks of Feb, we're kind of just going to unpack it and put handles onto it so you can see exactly what it's going to look like. And so the vision for the year, just to be clear, is the word reach. We're aiming and we're hoping and we're trusting that God would give us the ability to reach. And that stems from our vision, right? So when you walk into the church, you see our vision statement, and that is we exist to cultivate unity and hope with the good news of Jesus. Plain and simple, right? To cultivate unity and hope with the good news of Jesus in our community. And so every year we look at our vision and we think, God, how can we continue to move this forward? What do we need to focus on to expand that, to move in that direction? And the one area that we realized that we really believe God is leading us to is to simply ask some intentional questions about what we see the good news doing. Well, how can the good news reach? Because this is maybe a good question to ask. Is the good news reaching people? I'd like to say yes. Right? That it is reaching people. People are still finding God. People are still finding hope. People are still being united with God. So that's still a beautiful thing. However, we can add to that question. Can the good news reach more people? Yes. We're hoping it does. Because if it's reaching people and we believe in what it is, we believe in what the good news stands for, then we obviously would want it to reach more people. Right? And then ask a question further. How can the good news reach more people, right? So how can we take this good news and multiply its impact? Well, in order to answer that question, we have to make it personal. How can the good news reach more people through me? The only way we can answer that is by making it personal, because here's the thing, I'm not in your world and you aren't in my world. You have access to people I wish I had access to. And I have access to people you might want to have access to. But all I know is that in your world, God can do something through you in order for the good news to have a bigger impact. And God can do something through me for the good news to have a bigger impact. And collectively, we might not see that the 1 or 2 or 3 people I reach and the 4, 5, and 6 people you reach, eventually our efforts are multiplied. And so we need to ask the question, how can this happen through me? Because we need to start by realizing that's what Jesus defines as his mission. Yeah. This is what he says in Luke 19:10. He says, "For the Son of Man has come to seek and save those who are lost." Yeah. No more clearly in scriptures does Jesus define his mission. There are other times when he speaks about it, but I think this is one of the clearest verses where Jesus says, this is exactly what I've come to do. If you ask different people, hey, what do you believe Jesus comes to do? They might give you many different answers. If you ask people, what is the gospel? People might give you different answers. But Jesus says, this is what it is. The Son of God, the Son of Man, came to seek and save those who are lost. And if that's Jesus' mission, then that should be ours. Because if we are on his mission, he is the one that commissions us. And so you and I need to look at that and say, okay, well, how does that look like in my life? How can I help people find the risen Jesus for him to save the lost? That's the question we need to answer. And that makes us realize that you and I are commissioned to reach others, but not just reach them with the good news, right? That's our role, that's our mandate, that's our purpose. And sometimes we forget it, and sometimes we lose track of it, and sometimes we lose focus, and sometimes we make it about other things. And sometimes we get caught up in our stuff and our business, and sometimes the weight of our situations and circumstances weighs so heavily on us that we lose sight and we forget that, hang on, I'm here for a purpose. And so many of us are searching for meaning and significance and purpose when if we just simply turn back to the words of Jesus and say, more than me seeking my purpose, can I just get onto his purpose And in seeking His purpose, I'll find my purpose. Maybe it's that simple. Maybe reaching people doesn't have to be so complicated. Maybe we don't have to overthink it. Maybe we don't have to make it so complicated, right? Maybe it's just going into your world and living out what God has called us to live. And why is this important? Because we need to understand, not everybody has this kind of thinking. Not everybody believes this. We live in a world where many people say, well, you know what? I'm a Christian, but listen, I'm not going to impose that on you. That's your business. Like my relationship with God is my business. And your relationship with God is your business. But when I look at the scripture in Romans chapter 10, this is what it says. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. So what I see is a God who wants everyone to come to know Him and call upon His name. Right? That's what I see when I read the scriptures. I see a God who wants the same relationship that He has with you and me. He wants with everyone. Not some of us, not most of us, not just the cool ones, everyone. For everyone who calls upon His name will be saved. But here's the challenge that Paul gives us from the same chapter. He says, but how can they call upon Him to save them unless they believe in Him? And how can they believe in Him if they've never heard about Him? And how can they hear about Him unless someone tells them? And how can anyone go tell them unless they are sent? That is why the scriptures say, how beautiful are the feet of the messengers who bring the good news. And so every time you and I walk from this building and we go home and we go to work and we go to varsity and you go to your plant and you go to your lecture hall and you go to your school and you go wherever it is that you spend your time, every time you go there and you simply live the good news, you are a good news bearer. And you have the responsibility of saying, I'm going to take everything here and I'm going to make it real through the way I live. But it doesn't end there, right? We aren't just called to be bearers of good news in just our actions. We are also called to be bearers of the good news in our words and speech, right? It continues. So faith comes by hearing. That is, hearing the good news about Christ. People need to hear it. They see it in the way we live, but at some point, they don't just see it, they need to hear it, right? And here's one of the truths about the good news that we need to understand. I'm just going to break it up into two before I get really practical in just a few minutes. Why does time fly so quickly when you're having fun? That's wrong. Okay, it's not. Okay, here we go. Let's see what happens. The first thing is this. We need to understand that the good news is declarative, right? The good news is declarative. I've met so many people who say, you know what, I don't need to share it, I don't need to speak it, people will know it from who I am. Listen, that's partly true. Yeah. But we are called to also declare it because people need to hear it. Yeah. And as people hear it, it does something in them. Right? And so you and I need to understand and we need to learn, okay, how am I going to be a good news bearer? First and foremost, in the way I live, and secondly, through my declaration. So what do I trust God for? I trust God that at some point I will have the opportunity to declare it to someone, to speak it to someone, to tell someone of God's goodness, of His mercy, of His grace, of His love, of His redemption, of His restoration, of His promise. Right? So you and I need to understand that every time we declare God's good news, something powerful happens. Tell someone that there is a God who exists, who loves them, so much so that He made a massive sacrifice by sending His only Son so that He may gain a relationship with them, so that their sin no longer holds them back from entering into a relationship with Him. That's the good news. And here's the thing, we can't just share partial good news. Has everyone ever played that game with you where they're like, you know, do you want the good news or the bad news? And normally so, okay, the bad news first. And they share the bad news. And you're like, okay, what's the good news? And they give you half the good news, but not the full equation. And you're like, where's the rest? Like, no, I'll tell you later. And then they leave you hanging on the edge, right? And so if we're going to declare the good news, we need to declare the whole good news, not just a portion of it. See, we can't declare the good news without explaining the bad news, because then the good news loses its weight. And so many people get so afraid to share the bad news because somehow we think that if people reject the bad news, they reject me. No. If people reject the bad news, it's got nothing to do with me. I am just the messenger. And the bad news is this. The bad news tells us that if we don't accept, if we reject the offer that God makes for us, that He sent His one and only Son, well, that's not His best for us. Or as the scriptures put it this way, Romans 3:23, for everyone has sinned and falls short of God's glorious standard. Meaning that all of us are somehow guilty. All of us has somehow hurt the heart of God. All of us have offended God. And so there is a distance between us and God. And unfortunately, that bears a consequence. Romans 6:23, for the wages of sin is death. But the free gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. See, if we don't understand the weight of the bad news, we won't appreciate the good news. Because here's the question, the argument many people make is, you know what, God has saved you. And people say, well, I don't believe in heaven or hell. I'm like, okay, great, but what do you think He saved you from? Just think about that. What do you think we are saved from? What did we need saving from? What from it's from the consequences of our separation and our sin in Him. That's what we needed saving from. But then He didn't just leave us there. So if we leave it there, if we just tell people that, hey, we're sinners, that's half the story. Because there's another equation where there's a solution, right? Romans 5:6, when we were utterly helpless, Christ came at just the right time and died for sinners. See, that part that we are sinners, that we offended God and we hurt His heart, that's a portion of it. But the beautiful thing is because God sent His Son, He sent Him at just the right time. Not a minute too soon, not a minute too late. That Jesus came exactly when He needed to come, in the right time in history. And that's what makes the good news so good. Romans 3:22. We are made right with God by placing our faith in Jesus. And this is true for everyone who believes, no matter who you are. So in as much as there is bad news, there's also good news that doesn't matter what your past is, it doesn't matter what your background is, it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter what you did or didn't do, it doesn't matter. It says, if you simply choose to believe that Jesus is who He said He is, and that He did what He said He was going to come and do, and that He accomplished what He needed to accomplish, in that, you and I step from death into life. Right? We step from death into life. And then Romans 5:1, therefore, since we have been made right with God, since we have been made right in God's sight by faith, we have peace with God because of what Jesus Christ has done. See, those few verses, about 5 or 6 verses, help us understand this entire story of where we started, but where we get to end up. That today, out of all the things I celebrate, listen, we see God's goodness, we see God's mercy, we experience His provision. All of those things are beautiful, but the one thing I'm most grateful for is that I simply have peace with God. I simply have peace with God. I've got peace and freedom that I can come into His presence at any given moment. No longer do I need to rely on a priest to bring a couple of animals, ma, boo, and all of those things and sacrifice it on the altar. No longer is that system in place, that we simply have peace with Him, that you and I can come into His presence and simply be and worship Him and do what we did this morning and raise hands and sing and give thanks. That's a beautiful thing. Do you realize that there was a time when we couldn't do that? When the system wouldn't allow us to do that? That only one person could do that on behalf of others. When we needed to kind of wait outside and let the priest do his thing and then declare us forgiven and go ahead and do all the things. We don't have to do those rituals anymore. Isn't that a weight off our shoulders? See, the good news is that we don't have to strive through religion and rule keeping and this weight of keeping up appearances. The good news is that simply by going through the doorway, which is Jesus, the life that God promised us lies just on the other side. And once you make that decision, it doesn't just start and end there. Because listen, it would be so easy. Listen, wouldn't it be amazing? The moment you say yes to Jesus, the moment it's like, hey, do you want to give your life to Jesus? Yes. The moment you do that, boom, straight up to heaven. Imagine. Church would be weird. Right? At the end of the service, amen, woof, half of us gone. Okay, come back next week, bring some more people. Let's see what happens. No, after that, once you say yes, then the mission begins. Right? Then the mission begins. Then we get to outwork this good news in our lives. Then we get to see it at work. Right? And that's the second part of it. Not only is it declarative, but it's also invitational. The good news is largely invitational, because once I've accepted Jesus, it's not just me, myself, and I, because then I've got a mission to help others understand that what God did for me, He can do for them. How could we sometimes be so selfish that it starts and ends with us? How can we sometimes be so selfish that we never go through the effort of seeing beyond ourselves that there's someone else who needs this more than I realize? That's why the good news is so invitational. See, it's not manipulative. Please don't ever do that. Please never manipulate someone into faith. It's not forceful. Hopefully no one invited you to church and forced you here this morning. If you don't come to church with me, you're not getting lunch. Right? Hopefully that's not the deal here, right? Hopefully the deal is, hey, I'd love for you to come with me. And I want you to experience something I've experienced. See, we are first and foremost invited by God, right? We are invited by the God of the universe, not only to believe in Him, but also to partner with Him. It would have been amazing if we were just invited to believe in Him, done, boom, up in heaven. After we've believed, He then says, hey, now let the work begin. I'm partnering with you. You're going to be my witness. You are going to go into your company. Where do you work? Okay, over there. You're going to go to there. And you work over there. Okay, and you still studying? Okay, you in school. Okay, I'm going to take you guys that are in school. You guys are going to be my witnesses. You guys, my witnesses in that factory, that plant, that admin office, that school, that varsity campus, the bus stop. Wherever you find yourself, you now partner with God and say, God, use me there. That's what the beauty of the good news is that we become partners with God. Yes, sometimes we forget. Sometimes life gets busy. Sometimes life gets tough. Sometimes our own concerns weigh us down so much that I don't have time to think about someone else's salvation. Because God, I'm just in a moment right now. Can we just? But may we never forget that we are commissioned by God. That is the greatest privilege. Who better than to commission us? Listen, we get commissioned by all sorts of things. Some of us get commissioned by our bosses. Go out there and make some sales. We get commissioned by the government. Go out there and be a good citizen. All of that's great. If you're a foreigner, you represent your foreign country. Go out there and represent our country well. But how much more are we commissioned by the God of the universe to say, hey, represent heaven well. Share the good news. Tell people about this world that exists, that they have the privilege of being a part of, simply by accepting my invitation. Colossians 1:6. This same good news that came to you is going out all over the world. And what's it doing? It is bearing fruit everywhere. How? By changing lives. Just as it changed your lives from the day you first heard and understood the truth about God's wonderful grace. That verse has never stopped being true. From the day it was written to the Colossian church up until today, the good news is bearing fruit by changing lives. It's bearing fruit by changing lives. And every week, part of my job, which I dare you to find a better job description, is to talk to people and hear their stories about how the good news is changing their lives. How amazing is that? I just get to, people think, oh, you're a pastor. I'm like, no. I get to sit and have a front row seat at how God is changing people's lives. And you know what? That's not just limited to me. All of us. We get a front row seat at the people in our world, and we get to be a part of watching God change their lives. We get to watch husbands who were horrible husbands become amazing husbands. We get to watch moms who were crazy moms become amazing moms. Right? We get to see children who were completely wayward find Jesus and become people who are reliable and steadfast. Right? We get to see people who had a trajectory that was completely wrong just take a left turn and say, I'm going in a different direction. I get to see people who were purposeless suddenly find purpose. I get to see people who were so lonely find community. Like, what better mission is there to be a part of? We get to see people whose sin had them so knee-deep and stuck in addiction and suddenly find freedom in Jesus. We get to see people who were addicted to pornography and glorifying sex to getting to a place where they're like, hey man, I found freedom and I'm married now and I've got a beautiful wife and a beautiful family. These are the stories we hear every week. So we can't get sick of this stuff, man. Church can never just become a transaction. It's never just a tradition. This is our lives. This is people's lives. This is the mission that we are called to. So if the church is saying, if we're saying that we're gonna reach more people with the good news, right? That's the big picture. Now let me break it down and speak about how. Are you ready for this? Yeah. Okay, you still awake? You haven't fallen asleep yet? You want a stretch break? Askis, not today. I've got 10 minutes left. Here we go. So the first is this, is we are going to become, as a church, we're going to become more focused on being missional, right? And when I say that, I think everybody has their own idea of what being missional looks like. So many of you might remember, if you've been a part of this church for 5 years or more, you would remember that we used to be a part of a missions team. We used to go up to Zambia every year. We'd send a team. We'd go and minister. We'd evangelize. We'd build schools and all of that. And when we launched United Church, we kind of had to pull back our resources because we needed to build strong. And so finally, we realized that we're at a better place and we can re-engage being missional again. And so this year, what we're going to try and focus on is two things. Firstly, local missions, which is community impact and outreach. And so we want to be the kind of people who say, we don't just want to be on the corner, that little church. We want to be the church that goes out into the community and actually makes a difference. Whatever that looks like. If we can touch people, heal people, change people, save people, whatever it means, that's the church we want to be. And we want to focus our efforts in that. And so this year, what you'll see is we'll be ramping up our efforts and our resources to make a practical difference in our community, right? We're going to be ramping it up. You'll see all sorts of projects coming up. You'll see, for an example, what I mentioned to you earlier with Lifeline and us partnering with more organizations to reach the lost, the hurting, and the broken. What did Jesus say? To seek and save the lost. That's really what we're doing. We're going to seek and save the lost. So we're going to start here, and then we want to do cross-border missions, and we've identified two areas we want to explore, Lesotho and Mozambique. And so some of you are already excited. The moment I said Lesotho to our team, someone came to me and they're like, hey, I've got a 20, I don't know, what's the Lesotho currency? That, yes, I've got 20 of that for you. And I was like, yes, man, I've already got cash for Lesotho. And so myself and my wife are going down to Lesotho in the beginning of, say, a month and a half from now. And we're just going to go spend time with them and see what the need is. Because they do an incredible work, especially out in the Simongkong area and towards the mountains, where they're reaching people, they're evangelizing, they're building churches and all of that. And I really believe it's a great opportunity for us to be a part of it. And what makes it so amazing is it's not 5 days away, it's 4 hours away. And we can practically make a difference in another nation. And so Lesotho is definitely on the cards. And then later on in this year, I'm exploring with another team from Mozambique. And they're doing an even more incredible work. Their organization is called Life Child. And they plant schools and churches. And they have villages of hope and orphanages that they plant specifically for vulnerable children and women. And so they're going to be showing me the work they do for us to see how we can partner with them. But isn't that an amazing thing? Just to practically partner with people already on the ground and saying, well, we can just be a part of this. And so I'm looking forward to that. And so that's the first one. We're going to be engaging in becoming more missional. So let me ask you this before I move on to the next part is, maybe this is something God has placed in your heart. Maybe you've always been wondering, when are we going to do something practical? Maybe you've been saying, you know what, God has placed this thing in my heart, but what's going to happen to it? You know what, there's timing for everything. And, I've always said to people, listen, we haven't forgotten about that. We just need to get strong to a certain point. And as you've seen, we've grown financially and we've grown in resource to be able to be at the point where we can do more. The more we grow, the more we can do, right? And so that's an amazing thing. And so maybe this is a good opportunity for some of you to pray and say, God, this is what my heart beats for. How can I be a part of this? Right? This is what wakes me up in the morning. I can't wait for stuff like this. How can I be a part of this? And this is maybe where your passion and God's work intercept. And some of you might find purpose there. The second thing is this, to embrace the challenge of being invitational. Embrace the challenge of being invitational. And what this does, this takes the pressure off of the entity of the church and puts the responsibility on the individuals of the church. Because many times people are like, the church really needs to, and what they mean by the church is the pastor and his beautiful staff. Like, you guys, So people come to us every week and they give us stuff to do. Hey, the church really should do this. The church really needs this. The church, and I'm like, yeah, it does. And they're like, yeah, so. And I'm like, fantastic. When do you start? They're like, no, you. No, us. Right? And so when we embrace the challenge of being invitational, what are we doing? We are taking responsibility to say, in my world, I can do what I can do by extending the invitation to the good news. You know why? Because someone is just one invitation away from having a completely different life. Just think about it. You were one invitation away from the life you're living. Someone invited you. Someone spoke to you. Someone imparted something into you. You didn't just find yourself in the place that you are. Someone played a role. And you and I can play a role in someone else's life, even if that role is simply extending the invitation, right? We just do the bare minimum. God does the work in their hearts. God does the work in their lives. You and I just get to be there for the journey. And so embrace the challenge of being invitational. If we truly believe in the weight of this, right? Here's the thing. If we truly believe that the promise of God is what it is, then this is not something I want to shy away from. This is not a challenge I want to back down from. This is a challenge I want to gladly accept. And so invite people. Invite someone closer into your world, right? Maybe that's the first step. Before you try and Bible bash them, which you shouldn't do, just invite them into your world. Invite someone over for dinner. Invite someone into your space. Invite someone into maturity. Invite someone into a relationship with God. Invite someone into fellowship. Maybe you know someone who's already in church, but you know they're very in and out, last in, first out. Just invite them to stay for a cup of coffee. Invite someone to grow. Someone might just be at the beginning stages of faith and they just kind of barely getting grips of it. Why don't you invite them closer? Say, hey, why don't you and I go on a journey? We begin to read the scriptures together. We'll WhatsApp each other voice notes of our findings and stuff. But let's do this journey together. Why don't you commit to helping someone find growth and invite them into a season of growth? For those of you who are mature Christians and you've already been serving and involved, why don't you invite someone to stepping up? Say, hey, can I invite you to start serving with us? Like, we need all the hands we can get. Like, church this doesn't just happen. People make it happen. Can I invite you on the journey to be a part of the team? Right? We need all the hands. Can I invite you to serving? Can I invite you into deeper community? Some of you might know people who's got resource and they're holding it back. Hey, can I invite you to share your resource? Right? We've all got the resource we have, we've been blessed with. Can I invite you to consider giving towards this or to consider blessing someone with this? Can I invite you on this discipleship journey? We're kicking off Grow College next month. I'll tell you a bit more about that just now. Can I invite you to attend Grow College? It's going to be an amazing opportunity to stretch and grow you and grow your faith. See, each of us can invite one person one step closer, deeper into their relationship with Jesus. Here's a phrase that I'm going to tell you as we wrap up. The worship team, you guys can come up. The one phrase that you are probably going to get sick of this year. And by the time you're sick of it, you better believe it's only getting started because it's only going to be February and we've still got until December. And this phrase perfectly encapsulates what we're trying to do. Each week, each one, reach one. Each week, each one, reach one. You know what? We can't go out there and do everything all the time, but if each one person just aims to invite one person closer in relationship, closer into community, closer into life change, whatever that looks like, each week, each one, reach one. You know what that does? That takes the responsibility onto our shoulders. It doesn't abdicate. It's not like, oh, it's the church's job. No, that's my job. Each week, I can invite someone. I've got a colleague, I've got a friend, I've got a neighbor, I've got someone who lives in my complex. I've got a family member who I don't think Jesus will ever accept, but here we go. We all have those people who are like, hey, okay, Jesus, you need to do what you need to do here. But each week, each one, reach one. And all we can do is extend the invitation and trust God that He would do the rest. Can we do that together?
We trust that this message was helpful to you.
And we would love for you to stay in touch. So follow us on Instagram at United Church SA or contact us on our WhatsApp number.
Be blessed.